bear biology is, like with all wildlife photography, is where you want to start with the animal, understanding its life cycle, what they're doing, knowing what they're going to do next, or not really knowing, but hoping you have a clue what they're going to do next. So for brown bears, which is pretty typical of most bears, life begins actually in the den. They're born typically around January in the den, which might be a snow cave or a cave in the rocks underneath the snow in the case of the brown bears. They're essentially asleep for the first 3 months of their life. They're cuddled up with mom and nursing off of her until maybe April, late April, and then they might start to come out of the den. They're about a pound when they're born, believe it or not. They're maybe 4 pounds, 5 pounds when they come out of the den. So they're very, very susceptible to predation. So the mothers kind of are really careful with them at that point. So what happens is and we'll get to the breeding cycle, but out in the open areas or the areas where the adult bears congregate, the breeding bears tend to dominate. The big adult bears and moms who can breed again are out there early. Maybe in May, a lot of the breeding happens. And then by June, the breeding's kind of over and the moms with cubs feel safe bringing the little cubs out. And so June, July is a really good time for that. Unfortunately, a fact of life for alpha predators who are top of the food chain is a major way that they control their population as the adults eat the children, essentially. Well, whether they're children or not, they don't care. So as the summer wears on, about half the cubs are lost. And some of them are lost to other things, but a lot of them to the big males chasing them down and just killing them. And so one reason we kind of go when we do, which is perhaps a little ghoulish, is that the cubs are still mostly out there. As you get later in the season, there's like less and less of them because they tend to get disappeared. So for the first year, they pretty much just nurse off a mom, and some of the behaviors in the photos I'll show you are basically the mom is trying to get food, so she'll have fat and milk for the cubs, but the cubs don't understand that, and they don't realize it's a food source, so they're just whining and whining and whining, and mom eventually will start slapping them, or eventually she'll nurse, depending. It's just not unlike some human families. Whatever it takes to keep the kid quiet after a while. So the second year, then they go back in the den, and if the mom is successful and puts enough fat on, then she'll be able to have them through the winter. The second year, they're still with her, but now they're on their own a little bit. They're playing more away from her, and they're starting to eat food and experiment with food sources. The third year, they get kicked out really early in the season, and mom goes off to breed. And this can be quite a source of confusion because the cub doesn't get it. So the cub will try and run after mom in some cases, and mom's trying to breed with this big male who wants to kill the cub. So you get a lot of pretty interesting family dynamics going on there. Can make for some exciting times. And then they tend to maybe hang out with another juvenile or two for a couple years or not, and then eventually they tend to be very solitary unless, of course, they're a female, in which case they breed. And it starts over again. One piece of confusion is about grizzly bears, coastal brown bears, and Kodiak bears. For a long time, they thought there were 3 separate species of the brown bear. In fact, they've realized it's really one species, and the environment drives the differences. So the inland brown bears, who are the meanest, typically you find like in Denali or on the tundra, they don't get a lot of protein, relatively speaking. They have to live on maybe the occasional elk kill or a lot of berries and ground squirrels, which if you've ever seen an 800-pound bear rip up a mountain to try and get it like a 1-pound ground squirrel, it's not clear this is really a good energy trade-off, but they will do it. And then in the coast, they get a lot more salmon and clams and other protein and better vegetation, and they get bigger, and those are the ones that are the coastal brown bears. And then on Kodiak Island, they get the most salmon, and those can be even a little bit bigger, and those are called the Kodiak bears. But they're basically the same animal, just with local variations. There's also a lot of local variations in color. We're really fortunate the area where we go, for some reason, has a lot of very pretty light-colored females, this sort of cinnamon color you'll see a lot in this presentation, which is nice because they're a lot easier to photograph. A really dark bear is pretty hard to photograph unless the light's perfect. They do learn the hard way, so like a lot of animals, the bear doesn't, have like a book that it can give the kids to learn about food sources or learn about behavior, so they get swatted a lot. this guy just got swatted for complaining too much while mom was clamming. Bears do love stuff. They have a digestive system that, like the elephant, is very, very inefficient. They only digest about 50% of what they eat. So you'd think that would be a bad thing, but what it's good for is they can try new food sources and almost certainly not die. There's almost nothing you can do to keep the bears coming around once they smell fish. So fishermen and bears is always a contentious issue because it's like, whose fish is it anyway? So you need a whole protocol for determining that. So in our case, we were very careful. We don't take food out with us. We don't let the bears associate us with food. I mean, that's really key, because the minute they think you're related to food, you can't stand out there and photograph them anymore. Bad things will happen. One of the sad things is a lot of the bears do get orphaned. Some bears get orphaned, and some make it, some don't. For those who know Miss Peterson, this is his son Jake, who was up there with us one time. And this is this little bear, orphan bear. And the poor thing hadn't really learned to fish. So when we were fishing, it would like follow us around, kind of going, they're getting fish, can I do that? Where do you get one of those poles? You know, and it didn't really know what to do. And it was, in our opinion, probably harmless, although it was a bear and it was getting bigger. And unfortunately, after we left that year, it got near enough to, not this particular girl, but to another girl that was out there fishing with her father. And he shot it. So that's too bad about, you know, one of those things that happens. So that the bears can, if they get confused about their role in the world, they can start to do things that get them in trouble. Another kind of myth about grizzly bears is that they don't climb trees, and there are people who think that going up a tree is a good way to get away from a bear. Not necessarily. The cubs go up a lot, or can go up a lot. Moms will send them up trees, or they'll run up trees if they're chased by a male. Sometimes the moms will just send them up there so that they can graze in peace, like, kind of like putting your kid, you know, in bed, I guess. But the adults can also climb trees, which is a shock the first time you see it. Okay, so from biology, we'll switch to photography. And one of the key things about knowing the biology is then you can help with your photography. So for example, we know that when the moms nurse, after a while, they're going to sit up at the end of nursing, and that's one of the best ways that you can see the mom and the cubs. So we wait for that typically. So that's the sort of thing where knowing the biology really helps you. There's a lot of dancing, fighting, understanding when that's going to happen so we can get in the right place. Like if we see two juveniles out in the field, we might realize that they might start wrestling, so we'll try and get in a position. Because once they start wrestling, if you move and they notice you, they'll freak out because they're like, wait, what did we miss? Is it another bear? Because they don't really care about us, but they're worried about other bears. So anything they think might be a bear can spook them. So fights come in all sizes. The little spring cubs, the first year cubs up here, just playing around in the water. These two females, one female and her cub got too close to another female and her cubs, and they just went at it. And the cubs spread out. We thought we'd never see them again. The cubs went almost a mile away in each direction up trees. And these went at it for 25 minutes. It was made for great experience, great photography right out in the mud flats. And the next day, they were back there with all their cubs, and they were about 200 feet away. I guess they'd settled their differences, and that was okay again. They were out clamming. Another thing which probably everybody's figured out by now is, movies notwithstanding, bears do not stand up to attack anything. They can't attack in that. They're very clumsy on their back feet. They can barely walk on their back feet unless the circus has trained them how. They crouch low to attack. So if the bear's up like this, it's up to look around. So that's another thing. If like we notice something happening or something coming or a bear coming, it's a great time to move your camera to a vertical, because if you're horizontal at the bear and it's down on the ground and it stands up and it's 8 feet tall, all of a sudden you're gonna chop it off at the waist. So we'll kind of typically be like, oh, go vertical, it's gonna stand up. And sometimes the cubs will stand up, look over the mom, or the mom stands up and then the cubs will stand up, or other certain behaviors like that. Bears have an unbelievably good sense of smell. And one thing we had a hard time figuring out is they seem to know when to go out to clam, and it's not entirely clear exactly how they figured that out each day, and I'm pretty sure they don't have tide tables. So I think what happens is they can actually just smell the salt as the tide recedes. There's huge tides there. They can be as much as a 25-foot swing in a given day. So there's a big surface area that's exposed. In fact, where they're standing right now is actually our runway where we land, more or less. So they'll go out, I think they smell the tide, and they'll come out to do clamming, or they'll just come out to walk along the tide line. They're great scavengers. They'll pick up any fish that wash up, or shark washed up one time, or whale, anything they find that washes up, they're happy to feed on. Now, I just explained how bears were solitary. The juveniles might hang out with one or two other bears. Well, sure enough, you tell people that, and then we're sitting at the dinner table, and these 4 fairly mature bears start all walking across the meadow right to where we're on the second floor eating dinner, and they're walking across this meadow towards us, so we all jump up, get our cameras, and race outside and take pictures. This is another behavior which I hadn't seen for a long time, but every once in a while the mom will let one of the cubs ride her around, or a cub figures out it can climb up on mom and gets a piggyback ride. Okay, so that's some of the behaviors and some of the things that we look at. We'll talk more about some of those as we go. Technically, there's some issues or challenges. Freezing motion, like with any wildlife, is an issue. The bears in particular have very detailed fur. They have thick fur. They spend a lot of time chewing things if they're chewing grass. And what happens is the skin on their face is all kind of connected. So they can be chewing here, but it actually moves the skin around their eyes. So you may not notice the motion, but you need to use a little higher shutter speed when they're chewing or doing anything that involves their mouth than you might think to freeze that motion. Obviously, you want to isolate them from the background as much as you can, so that involves moving around a little bit. Flash doesn't really work on their fur. They have the guard hairs that help the fur stand up and keep it organized, and those things are very reflective. So typically, flash is not a great solution to photographing them, which means that unlike with birds, it's not that easy to get the catch light in the eyes and the eyes. So after you photograph them for a while, one of the things you really start to pay attention to is what kind of look you get in the eyes. Angle, one of the things about bears is because they spend most of their time on all fours, even a 1,000-pound bear might only be this high. So if you're shooting it from up here, it looks like a really, really, really big dog in some ways. So, you know, we'll see images so getting the angle right so it looks imposing like a bear takes a little bit of work. We also see sea otters up there. We'll talk about that a little bit, but one of my Ollie otter. So as far as the crafting images, it's basically the same as with anything: light, background, subject, composition, technical, and capturing action. Obviously, the quote golden light is great. What I love about Alaska and the northern latitudes or the southern latitudes is the golden light lasts a lot longer. Like when we photograph Myanmar, it's wonderful, but it's very close to the equator, and the sun kind of goes, you know, and it crashes into like an Angkor Wat or whatever. The sunset doesn't last very long. Well, in Alaska, the sun in the summer, you know, it comes up maybe in the northeast, and it doesn't ever get that high, but it goes in this incredibly long arc of maybe 270, 280 degrees around. And so for 3 hours or more, it's kind of low in the sky potentially, and you get gorgeous, gorgeous evenings in particular, which can be really fun. So the only problem is you don't realize how long you've been out sometimes. Like, it's what time? Patterns, I love patterns when we get multiple cubs. This one was an eye-opener for me. These 3 spring cubs were looking off at something, and I worked really hard to get them all lined up straight, and I took that photograph. But then it turned out the one I liked a lot better was where the one was actually looking at us and the other 2 were looking straight. And that made breaking the pattern is what makes that interesting, just like breaking the pattern is what makes music interesting. I think there's a lot of confusion about tripods. I'm not going to say you have to have one or you have to have a monopod, but a lot of people are like, oh, I can handhold my camera, therefore I don't need a tripod. Well, almost anyone can hold any camera for a little bit of time, but for example, with nursing, she might nurse for 5, 10, 12, 15 minutes even, and then suddenly she sits up. And if you're hand-holding your camera, you're not going to hand-hold it for 15 minutes. I can guarantee at some point you're going to go, okay, I'm going to put it down to my side, and that's going to be when she sits up. And you got to pull your camera up and get it organized and refocus it again. Whereas it was on a tripod, you could have it set up and you could be right here and be ready to go and maybe have one finger up or put one finger up. So same for bird photography, anything like that where action's going to happen in a particular spot. I think tripods are incredibly valuable for weighting. Unfortunately, they take room and they weigh something and all that, so there's a trade-off, but you're going to get more photographs typically if you bother to have one. This is the angle. Like, this guy's probably a 1,000-pound bear. He'll probably be 1,200 pounds by the time he fattens up and eats some salmon, or maybe he's 900 now. And I got really low here and was able to shoot him at eye level, which is very close to the ground, and make him look like a really big bear. I mean, he still looks pretty big if you're standing up, but he looks, you know, again, not nearly as imposing. This is not something you do on your own. Well, I did, but you shouldn't. That's why we're in a group. We always have a bear guide with us who's not kneeling down. He's watching and paying attention, and so we can do that stuff, and he'll make sure that nothing bad happens. And then the only trick is that, you know, you do have to watch your foreground, and we pay a lot of attention to the length of the grass when we move towards the bears, because we're looking for angles we can get on them which have the low grass in front of them, not too much of the tall grass. So that's something you learn by experience mostly. Cubs, it works really well too, because of course they're really tiny. These little spring cubs, spring cubs might only weigh 20 pounds. I mean, they're like a small dog, or maybe a little bigger than a small dog, but they're not too big. So if you want them to look like they're really in scale, being low helps. In this case, they were on a trail also, and by going low, we kind of make that less obvious than if I shot down. You could see this is an ATV trail that we use. Family groups are great. We always look for moms, and these are second-year cubs. Oops. These are a little bigger, so it's a second year with mom, and they're just chilling out there because she's bummed there's another bear out where the clams are that she wants to get at, and she's afraid to go over there with her cubs, so she's just sulking. 3 is good. Triangles are good. So here we have both. We have 3 bears and a nice triangle. I took this in 2001. I wasn't even there for a photo trip. I was bringing my family. My daughter and her friends were out clamming. So I got my literally 5-year-old daughter out there clamming, and she's asking me to help her dig up the razor clam, but I've got this other bear. I got my tripod set up over here, got my lens on it. I got this bear. He's digging for clams, and he's looking really pretty photogenic. So I'm running back and forth. I'm trying to take pictures and then run back and help my daughter get the clam. And all I had was a D1, so a 2-megapixel camera. It only shot JPEG pretty much. It didn't really shoot RAW as a practical matter. You couldn't get the ISO above like 200. And I took this picture, which hangs on the wall of the lodge until this day. And in 17 years, I've never captured like the essence of that clamming bear any better than that one picture. So it shows that with whatever equipment you have and whatever circumstances you're in, you can take a pretty good picture. The first thing, and the good news with wildlife is we usually have a subject. Bears are a great subject. Landscapes, it's trickier. I'm sure you've been to some of the landscapes talks because you have to figure out the subject. I like to think of the photo as a one-frame movie. So there's a story, but you only get one frame to tell the entire story instead of a movie. And this is a good example. This is an image that won an award for the National Wildlife Federation. But it also got picked up and is run in all the major London newspapers as part of a photo essay for Mother's Day for several years, because it's like a whole little story about the bear and the cub. And to be honest, I never thought about the story. And fortunately, I didn't throw away the images before and after this one, because when they called up and said, "Do you have the images before and after this one? We want to run a photo essay," I was able to help them out. But it's a good example, I think, of how people think of these things as a piece of a story. You probably know you want to lead the eye. You want to use angles. Triangles are good, light and dark, balancing, get your subject off the center. But as far as bear-specific stuff, you can use that to your advantage. Sharp, if you make the first sharp, and I'll give you a post-processing idea for doing that later, that'll really help draw attention to the bear itself in the image. And then blurry, you can use a shallow depth of field to do that, or post-processing, or the haze will do it for you sometimes. Colorful to drab. The eye will follow lines, gazes, and then it likes to see things along the way that are interesting to it. One of the things that I think is not always trivial about photography is understanding the role of depth, the middle ground. Connecting the foreground to the background with a middle ground is really important. And with an animal like a bear, it's particularly important because it can look cartoon-like or two-dimensional or small, You've probably all seen those truck photos, like the woman holding the cow in her hand. You know, if you get rid of the middle ground, people can't judge the distance, and therefore they can't judge the scale of the background. So like in this image, the fact that there's this water reflection that we can see going from the photographers to the bears shows us that those bears aren't like a cartoon cutout next to the people. We know they're in a distance, and therefore they're probably bigger than they appear. So it helps us with that. Tone and texture play a great role. I love the sand textures. You know, the first time you go out and the bears are clamming, you're focused on the bears and the clams and all that stuff. And after a while, you realize, depending upon where they stand in the water, the sand makes different kinds of patterns, and the mud makes different patterns, and the waves make different patterns. And you can pick up a lot from where you can get the reflection and what the patterns look like. For tone, I know like Vincent's given some talks on black and white. I like to think about what my image would look like without color. And ideally, the tone of the image would be strong enough it could stand up in grayscale to me, and then color is like a dessert almost. If it only makes sense because of the color, typically I find the images may not be as strong. Symmetry is very powerful in this photography, like any kind. So anytime there's like two bears, it's a great opportunity for them to do something interesting together. Gaze is very powerful. I mean, the bears, like people, like most mammals, they've got a little bit of a human aspect to them, or human-like aspect. So if we can see eyes and they're looking at us, that's going to create interest. Or if the eyes are looking at something in the image that we can track. Most of all, though, I think people can get too stressed out about this stuff. So you're probably, you know, well, you can take a bad picture, but a lot of your pictures are going to come out better than you think. And, you know, we really encourage people to just kind of relax, shoot what you want, look at it later, you know, then kind of refine from there. So don't sweat it. If you don't take the picture, you can't go back and have taken it later. If you take the picture and you want to throw it out later, that's really easy. So if you're in doubt, take the picture, look at it, because if it puzzles you at all and you're not sure, you're better off taking it and then thinking about it and going, oh, I know why I liked it, or I know I didn't like it, or I know what's wrong with it. So at least you have something to work on, or to show your photo leader and say, you know, I took this, but I don't know, I don't like it, or I do like it. Why do you think I do that? So shoot when you want to. So there's a lot. We take a boat out to a rookery which has puffins and murres, so I'm going to cover those guys a little bit. There's several places. Near Homer in central Alaska, you can take a charter boat out to Gull Island there, and they've got a mostly tufted puffin rookery that's really fun to photograph. The puffins dig their little burrows out there. Off of Seward, you can take the boats. They've got the glacier cruises, but they've also got the wildlife cruises, and you can go out and there's puffins nesting there. We have a little bit bigger rookery that we get to that's a little harder to reach from other places. Alaska has two species of puffins, horned and tufted. They're different than the Icelandic or Atlantic puffins that are found on the east coast of the US and in Iceland. I'll show you, I don't know if I have a tufted in this presentation, but tufteds have little ear tufts and a black chest. And this is all breeding plumage. In the winter, they're the most drab birds in the world. So they're not very exciting. They only come to land to breed. So it's the only time of year you can really see them easily. This photo took me 5 years. I had to find, you know, the right place and time to get the puffins with fish. I wanted them facing each other. They're actually about 1.5 feet difference in depth. So I had to have the presence of mind, which I did because I'd been planning this for so long, to spin the dial on my aperture all the way down to the minimum sized f/22 to get them both in focus. Blue skies are great for photographing them. Into the sun gives you the light on the face, which is, you know, another great thing. One key with a lot of these birds is the easiest way to get flight shots, if you're not comfortable actually tracking them in flight, is to get them just as they take off. So in the case of puffins, they sort of waddle as they get up to the edge, as if they're thinking about it, kind of like on the high dive when your kid's up there trying to make his first high dive, and then they kind of launch off the edge. So you can watch for them and then wait for the leap and grab them. So you can combine those two, and you can actually even get them flying against hard to track backgrounds. Oh, there's a bunch of other birds up there, these little kittiwake gulls. It's kind of sad, I guess. They nest in these big colonies on the cliffs, and we'll go out there one day, and there'll be these nests, and some of them are right at eye level, and we'll go back the next week, And the ones at eye level are often gone because a storm comes in. So the low rent district is down by the water. Those are the ones that tend to get blown away by the storms. So they must be the latecomers. Muras, I love these because they're like the closest thing we have to penguins. They fly though, unlike penguins. But they nest on the cliff edge, and they have like one egg like a penguin that they kind of keep between their feet. You wonder what a day in the life of one of these birds is like. It's kind of okay. Lots of bald eagles up there now. They're more numerous probably than ever, which like they are in most of the country. So all that said, getting up there, there's a lot of ways to go photograph the bears. A lot of people offer trips, or you can go up on your own. Some of the things I think are important and have caused me, that's the lodge we stay in on the right there. That's the boat on the left they use to bring over all the supplies. So everything has to be brought in by boat or plane. Some trips, you live on a boat and then you come to shore, which is okay if you like living on a little boat, especially in the rain. I kind of prefer being in lodge personally. And we get to work in the field, which is nice because some of the more organized, bigger places like Brooks, you pretty much are confined to specific platforms. So we have a pretty good advantage there, I think. And in my case, I only take about 6. In fact, the most I take is 6. Because you can move around the bears and they're pretty chill, but the bigger your group, the more they kind of like, whoa, what's that? And they won't get as close. So it's a much more intimate experience. The smaller your group size, the more you can work around the bears in the field. So, the trips, a lot of people try and say, oh, I want to go see bears like tomorrow. And the problem with Alaska is the weather's variable. So one reason we do 5- and 6-day trips is because it can rain for a couple days, and the bears don't care. They'll be out, and you can go out, and if you have a raincoat for your camera, you can shoot, but you're not going to get the best pictures typically in the rain. So we schedule enough time so that we're going to have some good weather days as well. And this is when it all comes together. This is one of our groups out here in the flats, and just the mother and 2 cubs clamming. I mean, they're very peaceful. If you notice, we're not between them and the shore, which is pretty important. We'll circle around, and we won't actually get this close to them ourselves. They're actually clamming into us. That's the clam bed there, and they're coming in towards closer to us. Because the woods for them is safety, so we don't want to cut off their safety net. We want to make sure that, for several reasons. One is it's not nice. It stresses them out. Another one is that they're not going to stay there if we're between them and their escape route. But if we come around here, we're not a threat, and we're out of their way, and they can see if other bears come out, and they can run if they need to. So we're pretty calm, and they're pretty calm. And we have clients who actually don't like to walk that much and actually just shoot from the trailers, but you sort of miss out a lot if you do that. Another key thing is you can't leave anything when you're out in the field with bears, because remember the part about where they like stuff. So if you wander away, another bear can pop out of the woods, and they will eat the seats off the trailers. They will eat your backpack. They will eat almost anything they can get their claws or teeth around. So what we take out in the field, we do take with us. So I love the sling bag, but Think Tank doesn't make it anymore. So I have a new one now that's a rotation bag. Like they've got a bunch of these rotation bags out here. Those work pretty well because you want to be able to change stuff around, but if you're out in the mud, you don't want to set the bag down. So it's great to have a bag that you can just swivel around and open up and take stuff out of and put stuff back in. It's another good thing for a tripod, by the way, because you can set your camera down on a tripod and it doesn't fall, it doesn't walk away from you or whatever. So it can be an advantage. One of the important things, and I think this is true of any kind of outdoor photo experience, know what you want to get out of it. Do you want to do photography like a sport, like golf, in which case going out and taking pictures all day is going to make you happy? Or are you looking for, hey, I really want to win an award with this picture, so I really want to concentrate on taking 3 amazing pictures today? And those are 2 different things. I mean, you can enjoy both of them, but you might only enjoy one or the other. Or are you primarily interested in the outdoors or in photography? Like if the light's awful, we can still go outside and goof around and even take some pictures. But if you're only interested in the photography and the light's awful, there may not be much reason to actually go outside. What's your attention span? How disciplined are you? How much time do you want to put into it? And of course, remember, it's wildlife, so you can't predict any given day what we're going to see or when we're going to see it. Oh yeah, bald eagle. I'm going to skip through some of this. There's some great scenics up there. Fireweed is coming in that time of year, and the bears in the field of fireweed are pretty cool. Unfortunately, the moose and the bears don't happen at the same time. By the time the moose racks come in and the moose come down, the bears are all back hibernating. Now, that may not be a coincidence because the bears would eat the moose if they were around and visible. So this moose require like going up a little later in the year, around October, you can get those. Not too far from Alaska, or from Anchorage rather. This is in the Table Mountain area. There's a lot of moose that come down in there. A lot of other stuff, river otters, sea otters, more fireweed. Look down, the bear prints are a fun thing to either plaster cast or photograph. Those are kind of cool. Now when you get all the photos, one of the pitches here, I'll talk about color management a little bit. I think it's really important, not because I'm a photojournalist and the bear has to look exactly how I photographed it, but because I want to be able to start with an accurate model color and get the most out of all my color equipment so I can get the boldest and the best colors that I want. So it's really the best starting point even for pleasing color. There's different versions of it. The Express, the Pro gives you the features with ambient light. Elite if you needed profile projectors, and then there's also a printer product. It's kind of important if you're going to take a laptop with you, make sure and profile it in addition to your desktop. This is one of our African safaris. We're profiling all the computers. Otherwise, you get back in after the day and you're looking at the photos on your laptop and you think your color settings are wrong on the camera, the picture might not be right, and people really freak out, especially if the person next to you has a calibrated machine. You're going to go, oh, how come your pictures are so much better than mine? It could be the identical picture, but if your machine just came from the factory, especially if it's a PC set up from the factory, it's going to be designed to show PowerPoint in big, bold colors. It's not going to be designed for photographs. So calibrating your laptop, if you're going to take it in the field with you, is just as important as calibrating your desktop at home. I'm not going to talk too much about this or color spaces. I'm going to skip over that probably too. If you do share, I try and use like ProShow Producer, which is how I built that slide video in the beginning. It only took me like 20 minutes. It's all color managed, so you can just throw your images at it. You don't have to worry about anything. So if you don't know if the service you're using is color managed, then I would use sRGB because that's the safest one when you send stuff out. For post-processing, I don't do a ton of work on images after the fact unless I have to, because I take a lot of images and I'd spend my whole day at the computer. I tweak the white balance like you can see here. Vibrance now is a really good tool for bringing out some light, especially if the lighting conditions are drab. Fading or decreasing the color in the background. And I love the tonal contrast filter, which is part of the Nik Color Effects package, which is part of what is now free from Google. The whole Nik collection is free. Tonal contrast, I just paint it on the bear. I don't use it on the whole scene. And you have to play with the sliders a little bit. But it does two things. It sharpens the fur in a nice way, and it makes it deeper and richer. And it's probably my single favorite cheat go-to for anything with fur. Is that tonal contrast filter. It's great that it's free now. Great, well thank you very much. If you have any last questions, I'll be around for a little bit here and then I'll be with the Datacolor folks downstairs.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.